What's going on, moviegoers, movie lovers? It's Mr. Filmstock, and welcome to the Mr. Filmstock podcast. Welcome to episode 3. In this episode, we're going to be talking about German Expressionist cinema, German Expressionism, or German Expressionism film. This is one of my favorite genres of film ever. And let me tell you, the first time I saw it, I was blown away by it. Basically by 3 distinct films that I saw, which was The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Nosferatu, and Metropolis. Now, I will go deep into the history and the list of films that are part of the German Expressionism cinema, and also how it started, when it started, and the factors of, can it be done today? So, German Expressionism cinema, or Expressionist cinema, was part of several related creative movements in the 1920s. Now, it started in the late 1910s and ended, sadly, in the early 1930s. So, it didn't really last too long. It kind of marked a period of economic hardship and social upheaval in post-World War I Germany back in the 19-teens. And this artistic movement kind of was characterized by its stark visuals, the dramatic use of light and shadow, even though films were still black and white and silent, and themes of exploring craziness, madness, betrayal, and the psychological state of the mind. You could say German Expressionism film started psychological horror, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. The first time I ever saw a German Expressionism film was when I was in film school, and that film was The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari. That film is one of my favorite films, and it's in my top 10 of all time. It's directed by Robert Wien and stars Werner Krauss and Konrad Veidt. It tells the story of an insane hypnotist who kind of uses a brainwashed somnambulist, which is a sleepwalker or person who sleepwalks, to commit murders. It features a crazy, dark, twisted, imaginary visual that you have to see to believe. Now, there are different certain prints of the film. It was released February 26, 1940 in Germany and runs for 74 minutes long. Now, the somnambulist is played by Konrad Veidt. Now, if you know who Konrad Veidt is, he also played in The Man Who Laughs from 1928 and was cast as Major Strasser in Casablanca, one of his last film roles during his lifetime. Now, this film is absolutely phenomenal from start to finish. Not only that, it serves as a purpose as to what are you watching, what's going on, and what's actually happening. For a film that's 74 minutes long, you can get a lot done and a lot of story. Nowadays, people think 74 minutes long is not a long movie. No, that's a perfect amount of time, especially for back in the day. It's a silent horror film. And to me, it's one of the first films to include a psychological horror twist ending when you find out what actually is happening in the movie. The stark contrast of the lighting, the shadows, the exposition, and how Werner Krauss plays Caligari is absolutely mind-blowing. Like, the feel, the look, even the makeup and the darkness under the eyes in the shadow, the shadowy eyes really works to an extent where it just works off the lighting. And the aspect of how the distorted sets feel, how everything looks like it's sharp objects closing in on you, trying to get to you, and then the exaggeration of shadows. For example, if you're standing and you're watching the film, or if you're in that environment, you're looking at it, but then there's a shadow to the left of you, to the right of you, the foreground, midground, and background, which actually works a lot. Not only that, the editing is what also reflects the inner emotions of the characters in this. And you're like, what's happening? What's going on? When we are first introduced to the somnambulist, we're like, wow. When Konrad Veidt shows up in this, it's like his eyes are closed and it opens up slowly, just to show that reveal. Silent films are very, very scary, and this goes to show that. But it's also focused on darker aspects of how human experiences work, such as insanity, betrayal, and even the fear of the unknown or the knowing. And often actors kind of exaggerate their mannerisms because it's a silent film. You really can't see much of what's happening, or you can't hear, but you can see it, which is really, really good. And the movements they convey, which is very intense, emotional in a way, especially how Conrad Veidt moves around. Now, not only that, the aspect of an actor moving around really, really pays method to the film Nosferatu, which was released in 1922, directed by F.W. Murnau, and it was an kind of an unauthorized adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula, known for its eerie, weird visuals and the atmospheric tension that the film was given. And when you see this film and how Max Schreck played Count Orlok, it's really, really insane. This film was released March 4th, 1922, has a runtime between 63 to 94 minutes long. Now, the reason being is because depending on the version and the transfer speed of the film you are watching. So there are many versions out there, but this film kind of is what brought German Expressionism to the forefront, because no one has ever seen a film like this. If you Google Max Schreck as Count Orlok, or just look at Count Orlok and Google imagery, or look at images, it's very unsettling and very nerving, because the image of this actor just looking at you, and kind of interesting that it's a true story. I don't know if it is that very true, but Max Schreck was a method actor. So he got into the role of Count Orlok, of Dracula, and started terrorizing people on the set, and just was a crazy madman. F.W. Murnau kind of changed the scope of how filmmaking is and was done. And after this film, a lot of filmmakers and cinematographers took to Nosferatu as one of the films to really grab the attention of German Expressionism films. It has a big impact of how certain things are done, the look and the feel. You thought The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari was interesting and unique. Nosferatu is even up there more. Now, in 2024, there is a remake coming out of Nosferatu, directed by and written by Robert Eggers. So I'm really looking forward to that. And I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how that's done so many hundred years, decades later, because it's really hard to do a remake of a film, of a silent film, German expressionistic vampire film. So it's really, really upping the aspect and the categories of what can happen, how can happen. Now, German Expressionism kind of significantly influenced development of film noir, horror, and other genres for its visual and cinematic elements, the way things were shot, the way things were done. And you could say, like, if dialogue was added to those silent German Expressionism films, could it have made it better? I don't think it could have, because you can just take those films, watch it, and really, really enjoy the aspect of what those films are. Directors like Alfred Hitchcock and Tim Burton really took from the German Expressionism field, especially Tim Burton. When you see his films, it has that lore and look of a German Expressionistic film, which is absolutely phenomenal. When you see a Tim Burton film, you're like, yep, that's Tim Burton. You watch a movie trailer, yeah, he did that. But then if you go back to see how and what he does and what he says in interviews, his influence was these German Expressionism films. Kind of the movement, in a way, of German Expressionism kind of declined in the early 1930s, especially during World War II, which led to many filmmakers to flee Germany. Of course, you know the reasons and the circumstances, taking their innovative techniques and ideas with them to Hollywood and other parts of the world, which was a really, really good basis for how to get things going and moving. It remains a pivotal chapter in the history of cinema, where not only was it for only maybe 20 years, but it was a short 2 decades where it left an impression on how the visual style, the thematics, and the acting styles were done. And it celebrates the artistic innovation of profound impact of visual storytelling. We don't get that much visual storytelling anymore in films today, but with German Expressionism cinema, it just grabs a hold and it doesn't let go. Now, the social and political climate of post-World War I Germany really pushed filmmakers to give new ideas and inventive ways of showing what can happen, what can be done. And I will tell you, one of my favorite films of all time, and it's number one on my best films of all time, top 10, top 3, whatever you name it. This film is always number one on my list, and it's 1927's Metropolis, directed by Fritz Lang, which is based off of Metropolis, the 1925 novel. It's a German expressionistic science fiction silent film. When I first saw this film, I was absolutely blown away by the visuals, the intricate details, the real aspect of movie making. This is not CGI, ladies and gentlemen. When you see the scene with 100 extras or 200 extras, I forgot how many extras are in this one scene. It's absolutely that many people. They have a matte painting, I believe, and it just works so well in certain scenes. The runtime in the original runtime is 153 minutes long. This was released January 10th, 1927. And it's one of those films where it just grabs your attention from the start. It's regarded as the pioneer absolute science fiction film, which started the science fiction film genre. And I absolutely attest to that. Being among the first feature films in the regard of how filming was basically took place over 17 months in 1925 and 1926 and cost more than 5 million Reichmarks, or equivalent about $21 million. It was made during the Weimar period, where Metropolis is set in a futuristic urban dystopia and follows the attempt of Frater, the wealthy son of the city master, and Maria, a slightly figure to the workers, to overcome the vast gulf separating the classes in their city of rich and poor and bring the workers together for the city master. The mediator between the head and the hands must be the heart, which was the film's main message, and it had such a impact. Now, as I stated before, I was in film school when I saw these films, and I will say I was blown away by them. I still can't get over how Metropolis is today, the dynamic of it, and how the set photographs, when you watch it, you think they were done in the future. When a film in 1927 makes a better futuristic film than films today, that is saying something. But not only that, it shows the dynamic of how you see the Tower of Babel, which was inspired by certain things, the Manhattan skyline from 1912, the influences, the elaborate special effects, the set designs, which will blow your mind, ranging from the Gothic cathedral look and feel to everything to the futuristic cityscapes that you think you wouldn't able to see to believe. The only thing that has come close to replicating Metropolis and the dystopian society of what it is Ridley Scott's Blade Runner. Like, that's futuristic, but that grabs your attention from the start. Not only that, Fritz Lang really directed a phenomenal movie, but it's Theo von Harbou's writing that really, really worked in this. You have the aspect of what the story is, how it's going, but not only that, it's slowly a science fiction love language film. And the score, the film score. You thought German Expressionism was only for the filmmaking and the thematic elements. No, it's the music as well. It brings a whole new light as to what is film and what is the genre of German Expressionism. And this is what that is. You have the common elements of madness and psychological horror. While Metropolis isn't a psychological horror film, you have other films that kind of really work off what German Expressionism is, what it can be. Now, not only are The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, Nosferatu, and Metropolis really big, and major figures were, of course, Fritz Lang, F.W. Murnau, and Robert Wiene, you have other films that were out and released during this time period, which was The Student of Prague from 1913, The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, as I mentioned, from 1920, From Moon to Midnight from 1920, The Golem, How He Came into the World from 1920, which is a very eerie film. If you ever get a chance to see it, check it out. It's really creepy, especially how the golem looks. Like, that's really, really scary. Genuine from 1920, Destiny from 1921, Nosferatu from 1922, Phantom from 1922, and Scatton from 1923, which were highly symbolic, stylized films of this time. The aspect and the genres of how these films were done. Now, not only that, The Phantom of the Opera, starring Lon Chaney from 1925, is an American silent horror film, but has a big, big influence on the German expressionistic look and feel to it. And like I said, it's a film genre that is surpassed of what it could be. When you have a genre that started in 1913 or the 1910s and goes all the way up to 1931, 1935, right before World War II or during, it's really, really shows. Now, filmmakers today really have the aspect of seeing how things work. I said Tim Burton, but not only Tim Burton, but Guillermo del Toro really uses German Expressionism film. He is a horror fan through and through. And he's mentioned many of times these films in his interviews, and it goes to show also in his filmmaking. Pan's Labyrinth, one of the most phenomenal films you will ever see, was directed by Guillermo del Toro. Watch that film and you will see a lot of similarities, which is really, really mind-blowing. Not only that, you see aspects of what can happen, what it is, and what is very different. Robert Wien, F.W. Murnau, and Fritz Lang all had very different ways of filmmaking, but they worked off of each other where you see homages playing in each of these films. Now, kind of film historians say that they share certain insights of the legacies and the influences and how certain things happen with films, but it also really kind of encourages you to watch more movies that you think are boring. Before film school, I thought black and white films were the most boring thing in the world. I really did. I really, really did. And I didn't get into it until I went to film school. I saw black and white film and I was like, what is this? This is what I've been missing out on. And then I started watching German Expressionism films, American silent films, black and white films. And then the talkies coming in 1927 with Al Jolson's The Jazz Singer. You have the aspect of you're really missing out on a big, I want to say, 5 decades of watching cinema that you have to be mesmerized by. Watch any movie from the 1910s, from silent films, wherever that may be, German Expressionism, American silent films, all the way up to 1955, 1960, and see how the transgression is done. You see a lot of changes happening in the Hollywood industry, and even with certain aesthetic, I want to say, because when a filmmaker makes a film, they pay homage to their favorite filmmakers. Filmmakers today pay homages to Alfred Hitchcock. They pay homage to William Friedkin. Like, they pay homage to a lot of filmmakers. Stanley Kubrick, for that matter. Mike Flanagan, who is on a roll with horror films, is absolutely brilliant in how he makes horror. And when he made Dr. Sleep, the sequel to The Shining, and the sequel to the Stephen King book on The Shining, he took that book, and made that movie worth watching. It is the true sequel to The Shining, and every aspect of what Mike Flanagan does is mind-blowing. He's coming out with so many films, and let me tell you, his films are amazing. Not only that, his TV series of horror is amazing. They're slow burns, but they're slow burns where they're written well. They're shot very, very amazingly. I don't even know if that's a word, but it's done to a point where you really see the essence of what Mike Flanagan can do. And I'm pretty sure, and if I'm mistaken, I apologize, but Mike Flanagan has some influence, and you can see German Expressionism in his films, because his homages from Kubrick are also homages from earlier directors that Kubrick liked. So it's like a domino effect, and when I do filmmaking, when I write, I take homages from my favorite writers and from my favorite directors, and I incorporate that into my scripts, because it just gives it that, okay, wow, this shot was from that movie. He put it in there. That reminds me of that. It's what it is. It's really, really good. Not only that, I encourage listeners, I encourage every moviegoer, movie fan out there to watch German Expressionism films. Watch all of those films that I listed. There's not many of them, but for the ones you do, people know Cabin of Dr. Caligari. If they don't, they know Nosferatu. If they don't know Nosferatu, they know Metropolis. Some don't even know what a German Expressionism film is. This is my favorite genre, and I can't get over saying that, because it opened my eyes, it opened my mind to another world of filmmaking where I didn't think that could be imaginable. And it is, and it's there. The intellect, the actual topics that are triggered by the experiences of what these filmmakers went through in World War I, as opposed to the standard action and romantic films that were kind of out during that time. It kind of brought a trend and a reaction about and against realism, and kind of used extreme distortions of the mind to show inner emotional trauma, rather than what was on the surface. So you're watching something, you're like, oh, I wonder what that person's going through. No, we don't have to. Let's not, let's just show them what that person's going through, and you feel it too. When you see something and you're feeling what that person's feeling, it's absolutely mind-blowing and crazy. The darkness, the moody aspect of it, and how it kind of brought a new look to American cinema with the horror films and the film noirs, like the silent era of the Universal monster movies. These films were hugely impacted by German Expressionism. Dracula, Frankenstein, The Mummy, Phantom of the Opera, Wolfman, The Invisible Man, The Creature from the Black Lagoon. Watch these films and look at the German Expressionism look and feel to it, because it is there. And if anyone says it's not there, they don't know anything about cinema, filmmaking, or films for that matter. In today's world, anyone can be a filmmaker. Anyone can be a film critic, because we have a camera in our pockets 24/7. We have literally an internet in our pockets, in our hands. We look at everything, every singularity aspect of the world through our eyes every day when we don't even know it. But there are people out there who don't know their qualms about, and they don't educate themselves about cinema. Cinema is a forgotten art. The art of filmmaking is a forgotten art. When you say to someone, I'm an artist, that can be a broad range of topics. When you tell someone, I'm an artist, I'm a painter, I draw, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a writer, they look at you with deceiving eyes and they blow you off like, oh, you're an artist? Oh, that's not a job, that's nothing. No, being an artist is absolutely a job. It's a right to say that if you're an artist, you're doing something that you love. People do it for so many years and so much that they just throw it away and forget about it. But if you're passionate enough about the art of whatever you do, painting, drawing, writing, filmmaking, becoming an author, do that. Have that on your bucket list. And then when it's done, check mark it off. Because you will find that the art of filmmaking today is really, really underdeveloped, especially with how people talk about films. The norm. Oh, this film is like this and that. Yes, I am myself a film critic. I like movies. I want to talk about it. I will give you the straight and narrow of why this film is good and why it's not good. I'm not going to go on the subject of, oh, these people say this is a bad film, you should say it's a bad film too. No, if you don't like it, voice your opinion. And that's how I want to say German Expressionism is, because today, if it was done today, people would bash the shit out of German Expressionism films. And it really shows for certain minute film critics out there who call themselves film critics who aren't film critics. I mean, hearsay or whatever you want about me, but I give you the straight and narrow. And with how certain things changed and the mood of a film in German Expressionism is absolutely mind-blowing. The creepy factor, the it factor, it's there. It's really, really there. And it's one of those films and the architecture, and even the dance, when someone's going like this, it looks creepy. It's like a spider coming toward you in human form. That's absolutely terrifying. It's the psyche of something that's terrifying that if you can't see it but you know it's there, it's scary. Anymore now, horror films are just jump scares, big music, and then bang. Well, whoever is doing something right and right now shows that horror movies don't have to be the scariest of all time when they are called scary. The scary it factor for a horror movie now is after you watch it and it stays with you, because you don't want to be in that world of a serial killer or a somnambulist or a vampire who takes matters into his own hands, or being part of a dystopian science fiction society. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. But when you see the reality of it could happen, that's the scary part of it. The scary part of it is the psychological imagery you see, the subtle imagery, the subliminal images. That's what's scary. There's quick flashes. It's like, wait a minute, hold on. People with epilepsy, I really, really feel for them, because when they want to watch a horror movie, it's scary. So it goes to show like anything's possible, but it's the movement forward of filmmaking that really, really makes it happen. Now, the influences of German expressionistic cinema was the traumatic aftermath of World War I and the slowly inducing Weimar Republic. Now, I'm going to get into the Weimar Republic a little bit. It's the German Reich from 1918 to 1933. That's all I'm going to say. You know the story, you know the history. I'm not going to go deep dive into the aspect of history about, who and what Germany did during that time. But from 1918 to 1933, the Weimar Republic, or the German Reich, were really prominent. And that's when German Expressionism really started. And you can see that Fritz Lang, F.W. Murnau, Robert Wiene really showcased their filmmaking into these films and showed the culture and the inner conflicts of what the country was going through back then. I mean, people are like, oh, Germany, yeah, this and that, whatever. I mean, it also influenced classic Hollywood cinema, film noir, gangster films, silent films, and horror films, but mostly horror and how everything worked. Not only that, you see the framing, and if you watch Vincent Price horror films and how the lighting is done and the shadowing is done, it really shows how the expressionistic style to certain genres really worked. I absolutely love black and white movies, and sometimes I incorporate that in my own short films because I love that dynamic of mixing the in now, which is reality, with color, and the past with black and white, or the past with color and now with black and white. There's a contrast to it. There's a pro and a con, but if you know what you're doing and you know how it works, it's going to work. And that's how German Expressionism really, really does its job, with the key characteristics, the influence on the directors, and the impact and legacy of how it moved certain things forward. Not only that, it also really kind of shows the crazy camera angles that should be used today from German Expressionism films, and the artistic ideas that translated into the real world and the realm of cinema. There are films of the German Expressionism era that should have been remade by now, but they're not because no one knows how to do it. The only one so far is Nosferatu, which is like, okay, that's going to be really hard to do because such an iconic silent film from 1922. It's a German silent film. But now they're upping it today. They're adding dialogue. That's even more difficult. You take a silent film from 100 years ago, you add dialogue to it. In the remake today, wow, what can happen? If the remake was silent and it just was that, I would have been very, very impressed. Now, not only that, if Metropolis was remade, it would be the biggest, most expensive film ever. It would probably cost between $300 to $500 million just for the set design, the CGI alone. And I'm not talking about the script or the actors or the actresses you hire for that, or even the crew. You have to know what you're doing with a German Expressionism film. And I feel like German Expressionism film needs to come back and make an impact in the industry, because we need fresh ideas, and fresh ideas is going back to the past and bringing it to the forefront of the future or the now. When you do that, you bring a whole dynamic of bringing up filmmakers who are given the chance to watch films I believe that they haven't seen yet. They only see things that they want to see or that they like. Oh, they watch films from the 70s, the grittiness of it, the John Hughes coming of age 1980s films, the hierarchy of the 90s action films. Or they look at Titanic, it's like, I can write a love story like that, set on a disaster film. Can you though? It's the hard part. And if you bring back German Expressionism for modern cinema, it will really, really work, and it will showcase how cinema has changed within 100 years. I mean, the Lumiere brothers really started out with showcasing how cinema should be done, what it can do, and then it just went on from there. And then the silent films, and then the Trip to the Moon came out. People were like, what am I watching? When you watch old silent films, especially German Expressionism films, you see the weirdness, the scariness of it. And it just works to a point where you're like, oh, can it be done today? People will find it weird. No, 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 no. Weird works. Weird works today in a way, if done right, it will gain popularity and momentum to the point where people will start doing that. There are a lot of aspects in filmmaking where people are like, what the hell did I just see in the trailer? What is going on? Oh, that's interesting. That's intriguing. That's new. Let's go see it. And then you're blown away by it. But if you bring back Expressionism, the German feel to it, the look of it, the filmmaking aspect to it, like, it'll be different, and it'll change the way filmmaking is done for the foreseeable future. Like I said, if you bring back something from the past, history repeats itself. It can be done in Hollywood. Just stop remaking certain films that are less than 30 years old and start remaking films that are 60 to 100 years old. Give us that. But give us adaptations and give us new meaning of things that haven't been done before. Nosferatu's getting a remake. Give us the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari remake and a Metropolis remake. But in the essence of paying homage to the original film, shoot it like the original film, film it like that, edit it like that, bring in the score, the music, change it up a little bit. Give these filmmakers today a chance to, compete with themselves to show what can be done in film. For me, German Expressionism is the aspect of what a genre is and how it's done. It's sad that it didn't last longer because of what happened in history in Germany between World War I to World War II. But I feel like if you slowly bring it back, and you have directors today like Tim Burton, Guillermo del Toro, use those aesthetics, that look and that feel, it will survive and it will go on. If you want to know more about those horror icons, those horror films, those masterpieces, those German Expressionism films, watch Guillermo del Toro talk about his passion for film, the old horror movies, the Boris Karloff, the Bela Lugosi. It just works so well. And the filmmakers that I mentioned are a few of my favorites. Love Mike Flanagan, love Guillermo del Toro, love Tim Burton. Like, they're really doing things where they're thinking outside the box, and it absolutely works to a point where you're like, okay, this is modern. This is modern German Expressionism. But could you call it American Expressionism? You can, wrap your finger around it any which way you want and then move on with that. But it's done in a way where it's fun. The look, the technique is contemporary, but it's also in your face and really, really good to see. So there you have it, moviegoers, movie lovers. Episode 3 of the Mr. Filmstock podcast about German Expressionism film, German Expressionism, German Expressionist cinema. However you want to say it, put it together. Watch these films that I've mentioned in the middle of this episode, because you will be blown away by how things are done. You want to be scared? Watch these films. They are absolutely mind-blowing. So I want to say thank you so much for tuning in. If you're watching this as a video podcast, and also want to thank you for listening. If you're listening to this on an audio podcast, I am on Spotify. I am on Apple Podcasts. I am on Amazon. You can listen to my podcast and enjoy every single thing about it. Let me know your questions, what you want me to talk about in future episodes. Let me know what I should discuss. Modern cinema, old-time classics. Should I just talk about a director, a movie, a screenwriter? Let me know what I should do in the upcoming episodes of the Mr. Film Stock podcast. Thank you so much for listening, for tuning in. I'm Mr. Filmstock, and you've been listening to the Mr. Filmstock podcast.